Hello, 7th graders. This video is intended to help you with this lesson entitled Context Clues and Textual Evidence. And also, I'll be explaining the essay question for this assignment at the end. So I'm going to let you read through your objectives, your activities. First, before you go any farther in this video, you should have read Chapter 8 of The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle. Otherwise, this isn't going to make any sense, and you're going to have a hard time answering the questions. So, stop this video if you have not read Chapter 8 and go read it, and then come back. And then you are going to make a journal entry in which you reflect on Charlotte as a character. So, for this lesson, you have 3 vocabulary words. One is antonym. I'm sure you've heard of this before. An antonym is a word that means the opposite or almost the opposite of another word. So, antonym equals opposite. A quote is to provide a direct repetition of words from a text. And that is one thing that you can do, remember, to avoid plagiarism, is to put quotation marks around your exact passage from the text and say, the book that you found it in, like Charlotte Doyle, chapter 8, or wherever you found that quote. Okay, if you're using it as evidence in an answer. And synonym is a word that means the same or almost the same as another word. Okay? Antonym is opposite. Synonym means the same. So, using context to make inferences. No matter what you've read, you're always going to run into words you don't know. Because of this, understanding a few basic strategies for figuring them out can be helpful. A context clue is any word, sentence, or bit of textual information that helps us infer the meaning of a word we don't know. In other words, to figure it out. Context clues can help us figure out what new words mean, and they can help us choose the best definition for words that have multiple meanings. And just as the context of a symbol can help us infer what that symbol means, so the context of a word can help us infer what a word means. And the gray box on the right, a reminder, to infer something is to draw a conclusion based on indirect evidence. So, context clues. There are 4 main types of context clues: definition, contrast, restatement, and inference. Definition occurs anytime a word is defined in the sentence in which it appears. Such definitions are often, but not always, indicated by a punctuation mark, like a comma, a dash, or a semicolon. Here's an example from Chapter 8. Twice a week we might have duff, the seaman's delight, boiled flour and raisins. So here, duff is defined as boiled flour and raisins. In this example, the clause boiled flour and raisins tells us what duff is, just like I just said. Sounds yummy, huh? Okay, maybe not. Another kind of clue is contrast. Contrast clues you into a word's meaning by referring to an antonym or the opposite of the word in question. Such sentences often include phrases that signal contrast, such as whereas, despite, unlike, as opposed to, in contrast to, dissimilar to, different from, or atypical of. For example, how does contrast help us understand what dexterous means in this sentence? Despite his decrepit appearance, Barlow was as dexterous as a monkey. Okay, so a monkey, you can think of, if a monkey is dexterous, what might he do? So monkeys can climb and swing and do all kinds of things, hang from their tails, some of them, all kinds of things. So that might mean that Barlow is able to do a lot of things, although he appears old and decrepit. So while not exact opposites, the word despite suggests that decrepit and dexterous are contrasting qualities. While decrepit refers to someone who is in poor physical condition and physically incapacitated. The word despite suggests that dexterous refers to something more positive. From this contrast, we can infer that dexterous refers to someone who is not decrepit, or said another way, someone who is physically capable, like that monkey. If we look up dexterous in the dictionary, we learn that it refers to someone who is physically skilled. That's pretty close to what we figured. See how contrast helped us? All right, then we have restatement. Restatement is when words with similar meanings are used. Here's an example of restatement at work. The willowy woman was so tall her pants were too short on her. So in this sentence, the word tall restates the meaning of willowy. If contrast makes use of antonyms or opposites, restatement often makes use of synonyms or the same meaning. Okay? And finally, there's inference. While the previous types are relatively direct, inference requires a bit more thinking. In this case, a word's meaning must be inferred or deduced from a word's surrounding context. Consider the meaning of yarns in the following passage. Then there were their yarns. I hardly knew nor cared which were true and which were not. Tales of castaways on Pacific atolls never failed to move me. Solemn accounts of angels and ghosts appearing miraculously in the rigor were by turns thrilling and terrifying. So in this case, the word yarns, do you think it means yarns that you might knit a scarf or sweater with? No, not really. So most of us take yarn to refer to a kind of thread, but here it's being used in a different way. As we keep reading, we get several clues. First, we learn that yarns can be true or false. The words tales and solemn accounts further suggest that a yarn is a kind of story. And that's exactly what it means here. If you look it up, you find that a yarn refers to a tall tale, usually telling of some fantastic and far-fetched event. So a note, in the end, if you can't figure out a word by the context, look it up in the dictionary. You'll be amazed at what you can learn. So here's a handy reference chart for your binder. So I would either, if I were you, copy and print this context clues type or write it down in a notebook because you're going to need to know these. So context clue types. Definition, a word that is defined in the sentence in which it appears. Quote, their 2-year-old was going through a period of echolalia, the time when a child repeats everything he or she hears. So they're telling you that echolalia means when a child repeats everything he or she hears. Contrast uses an antonym or the opposite of the word in question. Quote, unlike Yolanda's shoes, which were immaculate, Jose's were muddy. So here you might figure out what immaculate means because they're contrasting Jose's shoes as being muddy. So you might figure out that immaculate means perfectly clean. Restatement. Words with similar meanings are used. Quote, the willowy woman was so tall her pants were too short on her. So they're restating that willowy means that she was so tall. And inference. Word meanings need to be inferred or deduced from their surrounding content. Quote, Walt's malodorous breath made everyone's eyes water. So you might deduce that malodorous, if it makes your eyes water, it's usually not a good thing. So you can deduce or infer that he had bad breath. Okay? Let's go on. Now, this is important in your essays. Your essay question today and any essay that asks you to support your facts with evidence. Okay, evidence means textual evidence or what you find in the story. The ability to infer meaning is an important skill, whether we're talking about words, figurative language, or a text's larger themes. But when it comes to writing a literary analysis, we also need to be able to support those inferences with evidence from the text. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. You've made an inference based on certain context clues. Now you need to show those clues to the reader. You do this by citing textual evidence and explaining this. For example, let's say you were given this task. Okay, this might be your question in your at the end of your lesson. What is T a symbol of? Cite a direct quote from Chapter 8 to support your claim. So you skim along through Chapter 8 and find this. It should be no surprise that the high point of my day was tea with the captain. It was a cherished reminder of the world as I knew it. So your answer might be something like this. Remember, you're telling what tea is a symbol of, and you are giving a quote to support it. So, for Charlotte, tea is a symbol of the past. As she observes, then you put in quotations, it should be no surprise that the high point of my day was tea with the captain. It was a cherished reminder of the world as I knew it. This is exactly how you do textual evidence. You take a quote that shows your explanation and you write it in quotation marks. Simple as that. Okay? So, and then just a reminder when citing references, when you're writing a paper, all direct quotes must be followed by a citation that says where the quote is from. And we'll cover how to do that later. So when you're just answering an essay question here in, in your lessons, you don't have to tell that it's from Charlotte Doyle Chapter 8 or whatever, because we know what you're dealing with. But when you are writing a paper, okay, and you'll be asked to write papers this year, you are going to have to cite your sources to avoid plagiarism. Okay, so it says easy enough, right? So you're going to read through the Let's Review yourself, and right now I'm going to skip down to the, oops, it doesn't show all of it. We're going to skip down to the essay question, because you can do all the multiple choice just by looking up in the lesson and in Charlotte Doyle. So you're not going to be able to see all of this on this video, but you can see it all in your lesson. So it just says in Chapter 8, Charlotte tells us that her gloves have turned the color of slate. So think about the color of slate is like a dark gray. So while this change is only superficial or on the surface, it suggests that Charlotte is beginning to change. So what you need to do is pretend you are Charlotte's friend. And in a journal entry of about 150 words, explain to her why you think this change will be good for her. And use specific details from the text in your response. Textual evidence. Okay, 150 words may seem like a lot, but it's only a couple of sentences. So what I want you to do here is use a couple of sentences to explain why the change of Charlotte's gloves turning to the color of slate will be good for her, and then find a quote in the chapter that supports your answer. Okay, that's all you need to do is write a couple of sentences explaining and find a quote. All right, if it's not exactly 150 words, that's fine as long as you do what is asked of you. Okay, and again, on your lesson, you will be able to see the whole question. All right, so again, if you have any questions as you're doing this, please let me know. Good luck and goodbye.